Hi, this is Geoff Berry, and welcome to the Nature Calling channel, where we aim to deepen connection to the earth and to the spirit of life and to all our kin on this beautiful planet.
Well, thank you everybody for coming along to the show. Tonight I wanted to cover some themes which are dear to my heart and which I think should be included under the umbrella term of ecotherapy and the advanced ecotherapy training course, but which I think also have really general applications to current society, indeed to any time and place, hopefully, on Earth. Outrageously ambitious, I called this presentation Ecospirituality, Gaia, Animism and Ritual. So before we head into how I'm going to unpack that, let's just revisit some of the themes I was hoping to touch upon. One, embodiment, the idea of a spiritual path that includes the human body as an emanation or as a non-separated, non-distinct part of the earth body as a living matrix. Two, common to, I think, most spiritualities, the idea of finding home in the timeless and in the eternal, as well as, for our purposes, for eco-spiritual purposes, in the body and in this time. I wanted to have a little look at goddess spirituality and forms of that have informed my work that I think are endlessly fascinating and hopefully still really exciting and helpful to us. The mystery religions, ideas of initiation and transformations, and oracular priestesses, the muses, all that jazz. I was promising that I would direct my focus towards ways that we can all tap into these ancestral traditions and roots today so that it's not merely theoretical. And I wanted to tie that all together with the summer solstice and the new year, given that this time of the year, so it's December 18th, 2024, we'll have the solstice in a few days. And the new year I will treat as coming through at a similar kind of time. So I'm going to work around the Gregorian calendar, the more mathematical calendar that we've become used to in modern times, in the West especially, and think more about seasonal celebrations, including the lunar and the solar ways of keeping time. So tying psyche back into light and darkness and the ever revolving seasons, the ever cycling times that we all enjoy in life. Okay, the goddess. The great mother goddess is the foundation of most traditional religion, or for our purposes, let's say timeless cultures of eco-spirituality. So if we look at just in terms of historical perspective, it's very tempting to treat goddess worship and spirituality as a thing of the past. But just like Aboriginal cultures, we know they still live today. And I would like to tap back into those in a way that keeps them alive through our bodies and through our minds. But let's look at the matrix, the undying, if you like, foundations of goddess religions and eco-spiritualities. Reality begins with the mother because life is birthed out of the body of the universe. The material, the matter, or the mater, as it was spelt in the Latin, which was the name I used in my master's on personal dreams and the way they linked us to mythic patterns. The Great Mother is the physical matrix of the universe and of this planet, which gives birth to so much beautiful life. all of which must also die and fall back into her body. So let's give ourselves the code name Gaia for this sense of the Great Mother that continues to pulse with life beneath the separated minds of contemporary consciousness. As we explore what follows, I invite you to keep in your minds and bodies and hearts and souls and spirits the idea that when we speak of the animate world, the living earth, the more than human field of intelligence that we breathe and inhabit, we speak of Gaia, the timeless sense of love with which we all communed in the womb, as well as in our pre-patriarchal evolutionary periods, which were actually most of our history. For endless eons, humanity evolved in close contact with nature, listening to and learning from our kin in the other animals, in the plant realms, in the elements and places and rivers we knew and sang to, in the mountains who sang to us, in the sweet airs and dangerous times, in the ever unfolding reality of spirit become matter, or the non-dual flow of consciousness that is also the ground of physical being, until we wake up to it and remember our eternal home there, anywhere, anytime. So how do we find our way back to deep connection and relationship with, or even identification with, the always living, always dying, always present body of the universe, the Great Mother of nature, so that we don't feel separated or isolated from the giver and taker of life? And how do we do this with our minds and our bodies, our hearts and souls and spirits, with our breath, our actions, our thoughts, every day or any day, anytime? Ultimately, the question is, how do we ground ourselves in deep relationship with the fount of all being in a way that we can stay with so that it changes us for the better? Especially in this world that is moving so fast and so often in a very different direction to this, all about the external. So this is my aim, and I think this is the aim of a mature contemporary eco-spirituality. We know that we've been socialized into a very patriarchal way of being in modern life. We've internalized the laws of consumer capitalism, individuality, and colonizer entitlement before we even know who we are. And we must forgive ourselves for this. Every time we find a new layer or echo of this way of being, separate from nature, as if over and above it, filled with entitlement about what we should be allowed to take without giving back, isolated from relationship with our kin in the animal, plant, and elemental worlds. That's the great modern myth. And it includes trust in technology as the great saviour, progress towards an ever brighter future, unconscious faith that more stuff might set us free, that we have control over the planet and that we manage the earth for profit and have the right to do so. This myth is written into traditional Christianity, but it is also foundational to the Enlightenment, scientific and rationalistic ways of thinking too. We're the crown of creation, whether it be under God's good favour or thanks to our vaunted place at the end of an evolutionary path. I will not be spending much time on this, but I just want to flesh that out one more part. Immediately, according to this way of life, we're separate from the earth because we stand over it. This is something that arose with the great patriarchal way, the God that was separate from nature, who arises with agricultural civilizations that farm the earth and breed the animals, control the plants and waters, create profitable yields, and then defend the surplus. The great city-states of ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, Persia and China, Mesoamerica and the Indus Valley, all of these large-scale agricultural civilizations that settled in one place and colonized the places around them for more land and more power, They are the basis of today's global village, and in so many ways, we still inherit their ideologies and practices. But let's not dwell on this tragic state of events, but explore some of the ways we can renegotiate our relationships with the Great Mother and the Great Father, the earth and the sky, the ground of our body and the heavens of our minds, the light and dark associations with all of these aspects of life, the way the elements are framed in modern consciousness, the way the more than human world is considered, the way that our fellow beings in the animal and plant worlds are thought about and related with, so that we can experience that beautiful, liberating sense of an at-oneness that sits beneath but within every moment in every place. And how might we do this? With techniques. And the first of these we should discuss are the ritual forms. Ritual is a way of creating experiences that sit outside of normal time, sit beneath consensus consciousness and the everyday world we're socialized into. And we need to use these technologies because, as John Seed reminds us, even communities that live in direct contact with nature down tools every now and then to practice ritual. The world is too much with us, as Wordsworth wrote. No matter how mindful, conscious, or connected a group of people we are, we get caught up. Social politics, human relationships, personal and collective goals and challenges. The techniques utilised in ritual are, of course, widely varied, but there are certain things that are common. And then there are also common factors depending on the type of ritual we're talking about. But let's stick with our theme. Reconnection, deepening relationship with nature in a psychological and an eco-spiritual framework. I just want to unpack those briefly. By this, I mean in terms of how we navigate our personal psyche, our ego complex, that's the psychological frame, and what it might become, what we might become, what the ego might become when it finds itself inhabiting and relating to the more than human living world all around us, the Gaia, the eco-spiritual frame that incorporates the intelligence and animacy of the universe and the many other beings. That would be the eco-spiritual frame. There's really no great division, but I think it's important just to remember we do have an ego, and we have an ego for a reason. We have an individual sense of self. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a vehicle. We want to steer that vehicle into the oceans of eternity, or at least the oceans of deeper connection, of selflessness for a certain amount of time, in order to be refreshed by that experience, by that eco-spiritual experience. So let's start at the start. Moving into an explication, an unpacking of ritual in this eco-spiritual framework. First of all, it's good to set an intention or a goal, even if that goal is to act with less intention, to release ourselves from the bounds of so many responsibilities, to experience freedom or timelessness, as we know we've done before. We've felt these things before. And we want to get back to them and draw upon them, make them more a part of our everyday life. And for this setting of an intention, we might require some ablutions, some purification to prepare ourselves. It's not purification in the sort of self-flagellating, whipping sense that I am not worthy, I need to purify, but more that we cleanse ourselves of our everyday habits. This can be as simple as washing the hands or the face. Bathing was a very common practice before ritual. I want to introduce another one for our modern purposes, which is shutting down all of our computer tabs or apps, and even trying to turn off those devices at the power source. I consider that to be a legitimate preparation for a ritual. In fact, the I Ching, the ancient Chinese oracle, and the oldest book alive as far as we know, suggests that cleaning and preparing for a ritual is just as important as the act itself. So don't skimp on preparations if you want to set yourself up for a practice that's going to reconnect you and then inform you, because those preparations can set the tone for your outcomes. Next, the ritual itself. For this, we need a threshold. Anything physical or imaginal that we can cross that marks out a step away from the everyday and into the liminal. Something we can cross to indicate that shift. This could be a physical marker, like an arch we walk under, or a line in the sand we cross. It can be as simple as that. It can be accompanied by a chant or a mantra that might lull the mind into that receptive state that we're looking for. It could be a shape we make with our bodies, like a yoga pose or a particularly effective Qigong sequence, or even just settling into our meditation cushion or stool with a lovely deep gasho and a request for awakening. If we focus on these things, any of them can work. Think about the ways, if you can right now, that you approach the more than human world, and see if you can either jot down or come up with a threshold experience. That's something that you can repeat, something easy for you to do. If you're watching this on recording, feel free to pause it until you've got that down. So that's steps 1 and 2. Setting an intent, doing some purification, setting up a threshold. Then, as indicated, you step into the liminal. This is the foggy state, the mystery, the unknown space within which anything can appear or be sensed. In the liminal, we open ourselves to the voice of the earth, the wisdom of our ancestral lineages, the teachings of other animals, plants, and elements of life around us, even the mythic beings from the great beyond. Who could limit what might appear when we can access all time and space through the liminal? The spirit of nature on Earth, after all, is an emanation of the cosmic flow of universal intelligence. As our bodies arise out of the clay, through the womb of our mothers who arose out of the earth all the way back. So all matter is birthed out of an originary matrix. If we could track the evolution of this planet, we would not only recognize our kinship with all other life on Earth, indeed even with the seemingly inanimate life such as rocks and soils, rivers, we would also recognize our familial relations with the stars and the seemingly eternal space-time matrix of all that is 14 billion years of flurry, or another flex of life out of an endless transformative state of potential, to put the Big Bang to one side for now and to think of it more as a consistent breath in and out. Anyone who remembers their dreams or has been taught by a more than human guide, an animal or a plant spirit, or who has sensed strong intuition and guidance, knows the language of the liminal. It is your language because it is a part of you. No matter how mysterious, sometimes seemingly indecipherable or metaphorical, symbolic to the point of obscure, like some of our dreams, whatever arises in the liminal is a part of you because your psyche is open to all. Little explanation of how that works in everyday life. When you look at a screen, for instance, this one, allow yourself for a moment to realize the screen is now where your mind is. Your mind is now literally the screen. The screen is your mind. That's how awareness works. Where's the division? The modern psyche creates separation in order to remain safe within its limits, within its power, within its materialistic way, because this gives it the illusion of control, which in turn confers the bounty of profit. When you have the illusion of control, you can manage things according to classical mechanics. This all works. That's why we're here in this technological civilization today. And so on it goes until the seeds are sown and we reap them, until the cycle comes back around and we see the price of that division, the heaped up cost of that state of affairs. A lot of profit and nature breaking down all around us. In truth, in ritual, we can step through that thin veil of separation, that illusion of distance. And we can do it as easily as that. We have to create steps to undo the socialized ego. Thank you, but not now. To dissolve consensus consciousness, and which is made real by repetition, by myth and ritual, just as everything else is, and to instead allow this other part of us to come alive, this non-dual part of us that is indeed always already in existence beneath that socialized ego. Now, we've crossed the threshold, we've entered the liminal, we've left behind some bad habits, and we've opened ourselves to wisdom. What next? Now we are ready to enter into and capture the meaning of a moment, where we can allow something sacred to redefine us, to draw us back into its mystery and the poise, the balanced being, the connected one we were born as. Now, if we wish to set this as our intent, we may carve out a more healthy relationship with the spiritual or the sacred, the divine or the holy, whatever we like to call that dimension, which can be activated in everyday life with certain techniques, certain actually quite simple techniques that are simply not part of the common consensus conversation going on out there. Now, in that kind of space, we can experience whatever allies might appear, whatever guides or guardians we might already have a relationship or come to us anew. We can feel truth in our bodies in that way that an embodied sensate being can sense, in the same way that sometimes in our dreams we just know something. There's no language to it. We just know that place is safe or that place isn't. Perhaps we might feel a knot within released, or perhaps we'll move on from something in a spirit of transformation. Perhaps we've imagined ourselves as small so that we could avoid danger or pain in our socialized selves. Perhaps we've inflated to overcompensate for the fact that we weren't given the attention we needed as we developed, and now we can drop the pretense. Perhaps our guts are wound up with tension and anxiety because of the way the world is today. Nothing about our personal past. Or the way our kids or our partners are talking to us. All of these things, the realities that we deal with, can be let go of. The possibilities are as endless as the varieties of human challenges. Tolstoy was right. All happy families are alike, he wrote in Anna Karenina. But unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. And similarly, our problems are endlessly diverse, but the solution to them is often deceptively simple and common. Actually giving ourselves the time, the space, and the practice to drop back into connection with nature, with each other, a relationship with a greater force, with the kinds of things that are commonly devalued in a society that's devoted to commodification. So we're open, we're prepared, we're in the space, we're in the liminal. Finally, we might receive whatever message or sensation, communication or experience we need and are open to. And then we give thanks and offer commitment. So in the spirit of reciprocity, we don't want to just take gifts from this experience. We want to offer something in return. This could be as simple as promising to return to the relationship. That matters. To stay open to the guide or the teacher if they've appeared, if some power or force or figure has appeared to teach you, then they want to teach you. So you're offering to learn and to continue to learn. That's a part of the relationship. Maybe we need to give something up or defend some part of nature that is sacred to that particular teacher. We have had an experience with this kind of work on a retreat where someone felt like they had to give up chocolate because of its relationship to the teacher, and in fact the forest animal that they had learned from. I'm not going to. That's a very drastic sacrifice, I would say. But whatever, I think it's important to ask what we can do. So in preparation, for instance, for this presentation, I went to my main ritual teacher, my lifetime animal totem, which is the monarch butterfly, and I asked how I could represent its wisdom in this presentation and thereby show it reverence and show it thanks and try to do it honor, try to do it service, try to do its work on this plane, just to speak symbolically. There might be a religious compunction towards evangelism or spreading the word. There are lots of different ways to do service. That one I'm always a little bit nervous about. But what I want to do is underscore something that's often overlooked, and that is the factor of attention, of awareness. Our attention is so divided today. We are so drawn into countless diversions. And you know what Wordsworth wrote so long ago. When was that? 1798? Yep. Around about then. Imagine how it is today. The world is too much with us. We are forced into engaging with worldliness so much that our attention is directed by the world. It's drawn by the world so much that I think just to come to an awareness of that is a really fantastic outcome. If you get nothing else out of this presentation, for instance, but that to think, hey, I want to draw some of my attention back to something that's more important to me, that's a great outcome. That's a meaningful outcome. Just because it can't be commodified doesn't mean it's incredibly valuable. Now, some of the ways that our attention is divided are, of course, very important. Family, home, community, even work. If we like, if we like to do work that we value, that we're committed to. But we know that a lot of ways that our attention is diverted are not that important. So we want to take some of that attention back and put it into eco-spiritual relationship work. And we can do that through ritual. It's just one technique that I wanted to cover in this session. And then, of course, the final step for any of these kinds of processes is crossing the threshold back into everyday life with as much of the gifts as we can retain so that we can make them real in every day, so that inform our lives, so that it's not just some fun experiment that is then left behind. And so often, even for the most committed of us, this can happen. We can have a big experience and then not really do anything with it. And that's why in the work that I want to follow up down this stream of this kind of work that I want to offer, that I want to do more of, I want to help people to create ritual in their everyday lives that draws on their powerful experiences and keeps them alive and keeps them fresh. The everyday ritual that I do draws upon a couple of the most powerful dreams and experiences I've had in my life because I want to keep being informed by them, not to let them just fade away into the distance like an echo. So these kinds of techniques can help us evolve back to connection, to embodied spirituality, to a way of being that's aligned with the earth and with the cosmic flow of the heavens, especially if we set an intent that that's what we want. Not clinging to ego, but also not denying it. Just dissolving that socialized sense of the individual to make it a smaller vehicle so that we can navigate the human world, not negating who we are, but allowing a greater sense of being to fill our psyche, our body, mind, our non-separated, unified self with heart, soul, and spirit. at one with life. And this is not a modern problem. This is an ancient problem. Okay, it might be worse because of screen time, because of technology, because of capitalism, because of ecosystem breakdown. But in fact, the great historian of religion, Messiah Eliade, saw this decades ago, that primal religion very often the early myths begin with the recognition that we must kill God or the goddess before we can reunite with it. This is actually how human consciousness works in a certain way. And that's why these techniques are ancient, because we've always had to deal with this. As soon as we realized we are separate, every thought we have that's about us as an individual, let's face it, in daily life, that's most of our thoughts. That thought is unconsciously separating us from all else. I'll just unpack that a little bit. We come into consciousness by a process of splitting apart from the world in order to know ourselves as individual beings. You've done that. I've done that. Anyone who identifies as a human is part of this process. This is the great trick of the human mind. It's our power and our downfall in one, that we can recognize ourselves as a separate individual. Our minds make those distinctions. Without that, we would not have this language. We would not have this consciousness. We would not have this meeting. Human consciousness is built on separation. Once we recognize this, that's when we can also work to get it back. And that's what myth, originally, great stories that relink us to the sacred, and ritual, the exercises based on those stories, that's what they do. They bring ourselves back to connection. Okay, how are we going to return with the gifts? By the way, I recognize I didn't really cover Summer Solstice yet. I will come back to that. So the process is ongoing. The process is not just modern. The process is timeless. How do we recognize ourselves for who we are and also tie ourselves back into the all, into the unity? The goal, therefore, seems to me to be fairly timeless as well, to get back the sense of unity with nature and the cosmos and to stay there, as Joseph Campbell pointed out, someone I've learnt a lot from. So this is more about immanence, an experience of an embodied spirituality within, rather than the transcendence that's offered by more godly religious traditions. The goddess spiritualities are more suited to this kind of experience because they offer an embodied model for immanence. As we see from the ancient stone tombs that acted as ritual wombs for our forebears, I'll show you a couple of those in a moment. Tunnels back into the earth, into the body of the Great Mother, where we could re-experience birth as a fully formed human person, back to the mystery out of which we emerged, to be nourished and nurtured again by the spirit of life itself, as it is manifest on this planet at this time, this exact time. But don't forget, we have access to this experience too. This is not an outdated technology. This is a timeless technology that modern society has convinced us is not relevant anymore. Now, what Campbell saw was that we crave not a meaning of life, but an experience of it, the unmediated access to being with the sacred in life, a primal experience of at-one-ment, as he broke down the word atonement, at-one-ment. That's what we want. That's what he saw that myth and ritual was trying to bring us back to. And I will speak to Summer Solstice celebration, which, if you're watching this before then, is on Saturday, the 21st of December this year in the Southern Hemisphere. But as always, when I thought about what I might do about the solstice, because for me, that is how I celebrate this festive season, the solstice and the new year. Christmas is a thing that seems to me to have been built upon the pagan celebration of the solstice, and there's a fair bit of evidence for that. So I wanted to drop into that really seriously for my own spiritual purposes. I don't want to let this season pass without having a spiritual experience of what it means to me in my mind body. So if Christmas is really just about family and feasting and gifting, then What about the rest of me? What about the eco-spiritual me? What can I do with that? I wanted to explore the solstice for that purpose, but as always, before consulting something like a symbol dictionary or a Wikipedia on ancestral traditions, I want you to join me, and I invite you to just stop everything, including listening to me, and just drop into your own body. Let's just take a few breaths to explore what light means to us. Yeah, give yourself back your own self-awareness. And with a few calming and centering breaths, ask yourself, what does light mean to you? Because the original source of all light that brings life to this planet is the sun. And it will be at its strongest for the solstice. Any seeds you have planted in the soil of your psyche, or indeed in your garden, have been striving to lift out of the earth and reach for the sky. The whole plant world worships light. And now the light is at its strongest, and we will see that the plant life is at its strongest. Certainly it is where I live at the moment. Very profuse growth this year. Seedlings seek light and strength. Trees now might be bursting with growing fruit. The plant world is in a powerful phase. Some say herbs and other medicines are at their strongest at this time of year, but I think that's a more complex and nuanced pattern to track from what I know of herbal medicines and plant medicines. Either way, this is a great time to take stock of your growth processes. How far have you come? Where were you a year ago on your journey? Or perhaps more importantly, 6 months ago at the winter solstice when you went deep within? What decisions have you made that support your expansion? While winter is good for introspection, summer begs us to come out and play. Well, I also want to be careful about setting up any kind of dualistic program here. Any day might ask us to quieten down and go within, and any moment might inspire more social or worldly activities. And again, I also really want to stay with the real. We're not living in a world that celebrates solstices and equinoxes as a community, as a widespread human fact. We're often not living in one place all the time. So the meaning of things like solstices and equinoxes has changed. But I want to use the opportunity, regardless, this point in time, to come back to a reflection. And I ask you to do the same again. If you're watching this on a recording, please feel free to pause and take notes about your own process, where you're at for this solstice, where you're at in the world. And in terms of ritual, commonly around a summer solstice, you might like to light a candle or even have a bonfire. Write some things you want to let go of and throw them into that fire. It's a great common ritual. And consecrate your process to the sun, to the light. Don't forget that one of the most universal human religious passions has been to worship the sun. It is our local star, the golden regent of the heavens, the bringer of light to earth, herald of the gods, and furnace in the cosmic flow. So I think it's a beautiful thing. As much as I want to come back to earth, I want my goddess spirituality back. We're going to return to that right now. At the summer solstice, I think it's important also to open out to that cosmic power of light. So let's return to Gaia, the great mother, the goddess of eco-spirituality, if you will. lest we allow ourselves only to follow light and forget where it comes from. The eternal womb of the universe, its birthplace in the darkness, the ground out of which life appears and to which it returns. And I did still want to visit my Celtic and Norman ancestors, but before we do that, let's recall one of the names, one of the ways that Gaia's name came back into common usage in modern times. And that is, of course, thanks to planetary scientist James Lovelock. The Gaia hypothesis came into being as Lovelock discovered more and more ways that life seems to protect itself. Over millions of years, for instance, the amount of oxygen in our atmosphere has remained at a constant 21%, in spite of huge events that saw it fluctuate for a certain amount of time. But each time, another aspect of our biosphere would act to rebalance that equation, bring it back to 21%, give or take, which is the perfect amount of oxygen to support the kinds of life we see flourishing all around us still today. The other key component that he realized played into this rebalancing process was complexity. In brief, the more complex a system is, the more likely it can re-find balance or homeostasis, because one thing that might have gotten thrown out, a hyperinflation of one population or the crash of another, would have several ways of being redressed. By comparison, in a very simple system, such as a monoculture, one problem can destroy an entire species. An example would be one insect that eats out a crop with devastating consequences. Now, of course, in the anthropocentric world, we just introduce a chemical to fix this. But that only compounds the problem in the long run, because that pesticide then runs into the ocean and poisons other creatures and ecosystems, leading to greater damage later on. And again, therefore, simple systems more destructive. The deathly consequences of that game of cat and mouse post-agricultural civilization has been playing are only just coming home to roost, but I promise not to rain on this parade at this point in time. We'll deal with increasing climate chaos in another session. For now, I find it heartening to know that a serious scientist like Lovelock, along with his colleague Lynn Margulis, who extended the Gaia hypothesis as well, to name a physical phenomenon after a goddess, thereby recognizing the spirit of life that seemed to be wanting to be, which is what he was seeing in empirical evidence. And I've also had the good fortune of interviewing, unfortunately passed away since, one of our greatest climate scientists in Australia. And chatting to him, he talked about weak and strong Gaia hypotheses. And that was a way of pointing out that the scientific community has indeed accepted something like a weak Gaia hypothesis. Life protects itself. I think the part that pushes many scientists away then is the idea that life wants to protect itself, that there's some kind of spiritual force at play. And that's a space that I'm perfectly happy to inhabit in between those things. I don't really need very strong answers. I can tell that complex systems love life, that simple beings like us love life. And sorry, that was Professor Will Steffen that I was talking about, a great man. Okay, we've flipped into summer solstice sun worship back down to Gaia. Let's have a look at some ways that some of these techniques of getting back into an eco-spiritual psyche have played out over time. I've been to both of these places. So my Celtic and Norman ancestors, they both left countless passage tombs. The one that's on my left, the one that's standing up above ground now, I think its specific name is Brúthnaboyne. It's in the west of Ireland. But would have originally been a tunnel into the ground. The ground around it has eroded since. The one on the right is in the north of Guernsey, the Channel Isles that have been inhabited for centuries by my other sets of forebears, the Normans. And I have sat in both of these spaces and other tombs for significant periods of time when I probably should have been doing something else associated with my postdoc, but kept running away to stone circles and tombs to try and figure out what these things really meant. Why these stone tunnels into the underground, leading to a cavern. So this one, the Guernsey one there, that's the cavern. We've gone down through the tunnel. Leading into a cavern for the faithful, for groups of people to fill with their sweating human bodies, to reconnect with the fount of life while we're still here, to incarnate something of our brief flickering on earth that's connected to the great beyond, to whatever mystery might arise in our psyche while we're in the darkness. Of course, these spaces would have been completely dark. And the Greek mystery religions did the same, entering into the underworld to rekindle relationship with both darkness and light, life and death, regeneration, and our teachers from the animal, plant, elemental, and mythic realms. So the key question, I think, to take into the earth is what arises from the depths? That seems to me to be the point behind all of the different mystery religion processes that I've read about and learnt about. When we go into the darkness of Gaia, what might arise for us as a particular being from the unlimited realm of knowledge and wisdom that is in the psyche the size of the earth? Who or what awaits us in these chthonic realms? Symbolic representations common to this adventure include the serpent, the waters of life, the seed, and the shadow. So when we read into all of the different goddess religions, these are the kinds of symbols that come up very commonly. For myself, I revere Medusa, the Gorgon, the snake-haired spirit of the earth, the primal consort of the sea god, Poseidon. Medusa gives birth to the mighty Pegasus, who apprenticed me in the most powerful dream of my life, to nature spirit. But what will come to you? That's what's important. What might come to you from within the passage tomb of ritual, going down into the darkness of the earth to feel what wisdom is appropriate for you at this point in time. So I wanted to explore, just briefly, a timeless and timely rite. And while we're doing so, let's not forget another ritual path to the sacred mysteries of awakening, which is dream incubation, practiced very famously by the priestesses of Delphi or Delphi in Greece, the ancient oracle form. So, did you know Delphi is most famous for being the home of Apollo, but that's actually a late transition in the mythic records. Well before Apollo and his arrow comes along, the bright god of the Hellenics, it was sacred to the Pelasgian matrilineal worshippers of Pytho, the great cosmic and earth serpent, for centuries before the taller, whiter Hellenic people imported their bright, shining, and aggressive god. And this is well attested in the literature. So I think it's important to get beneath the stories, even the sacred ones, behind the history that we're served in our books, and remember the rites that held our more ancient ancestors together. One of my teachers, the person that examined my masters, Sean Kane, a Canadian writer, he wrote a book called The Wisdom of the Myth Tellers. And he said, never forget, all the myths you've been told, all the ones you've read, they come from this side of the agricultural revolution. They come from the last 10,000 years. What about the ones from the hundreds of thousands of years of evolution before that weren't written down? We have just enough evidence to figure out what they were about. They were about local connection. They were about what we would now call eco-spirituality. They were about being open to the darkness. They were about learning from our kin, the other creatures and beings of this planet. And in the goddess religions, especially the serpents, the waters, the seeds. So getting behind these stories, I did this in my PhD for a whole section of it. I just read first records, and my entire aim was to work out from the first written myths what had come before them. Often, what were the first written myths demonizing and saying the bad barbarians used to believe? Because, of course, that's what a colonizing society is going to do, point out how right they are. So let's drop as deeply as possible into the mysterious darkness behind, beneath, and within the body mind, where we'll find new signs of the oldest spirituality, new ways to fall back in love with the earth and with our kin here, to be empowered in relationship with the many beings, to learn from them and honor them and give thanks to them. Incubating dreams is another goddess-inspired practice that can take us a long way back to our primal roots if we granted our attention. Now, dream incubation could be the theme for a whole session in its own right, obviously, indeed for a whole course, as could many of these rites. It's something I've worked on since I was about 18, and I have noticed, I have to admit, the results can be random. And perhaps that's because I don't have a sacred site like Delphi and a host of priestesses with serpents to support the process. Sadly, I would love that. I'm sure that would help. But amongst the very often confusing dreams we still have, no matter how long we work with our dreaming life, we can get a dream that's so powerful that I believe it should be included in our personal spiritual practice, in our everyday ritual. And I had one of these about a swarm of serpents that were flying up towards me. So I was very high in the sky and I saw something dark coming towards me. I had that first, ooh, what's that? And then I saw it was a flock of serpents flying straight towards me up in the sky. And then I saw that they were towing a golden chariot with a goddess in it. And as she approached, I could see her more clearly. I think she resembled Athena most from what I've seen of the goddess imagery. And Athena, by the way, was the goddess who handed Bellerophon the golden harness with which he could tempt Pegasus to be ridden. But there was no other sign of who this particular goddess was. Looking for a sign and looking, obviously, in the dream, being shocked into heightened awareness, I was astounded when she said thanks as she flew by. Cosmic serpents ahead of her, the whole host ripping through the air, and so representing at least those two elements, by the way, the earth and the air. And if you read into the goddess literature, you will find from the classic authors like Gimbutas and Sju. Wait, I've got them right here. In fact, my laptop is leaning on The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth by Sju and more, and The Goddesses and Gods of Old Europe, Myths and Cult Images by Maria Gimbutas. They will talk about the way that the goddesses would represent all of the elements, that it's a later practice to say this goddess does this. That's why we still get traces of things like a goddess of love and war, which you would think would be opposites, but in fact are combined. It's common. Likewise, I find Pegasus, for me, represents the earth as he springs from the beheaded Earth Mother, Medusa's blood, as it hits the ground. And she is so therefore he's sired by Poseidon, because that's his father through Medusa, the spirit of deep sea water. Yet Pegasus, of course, is at most at home in the air, flying magnificently, whether he's carrying the storm god's thunderbolts or not. Okay, what do we do when a goddess says thanks in a dream? This is unexpected. I know Jung claimed that a dream is never a pat on the back. And I would say, in this case, this is one of the areas that I don't agree with Jung. I've had many dreams that were fabulously confirming of my path. Okay, maybe I'm a little too open to inspiration at times. Still, we have happy dreams, right? We have good confirming dreams. And I think it's important to celebrate those. Still, what do you do when a goddess says thanks? Okay, fair enough. You put in years of hard work attempting to do her honor on the ground as a loyal son. But it seems to me the only appropriate response is to say back, you're welcome. and to keep at it, and to offer her space in my psyche, and to bring her work to fruition. That's what I mean by bringing that experience into my personal eco-spirituality and to my practice. So I include that in my daily ritual. I do a serpent pose and I roll my spine joyfully from base to crown and say, you're welcome to all the serpentine energies that are running up like a kundalini serpent from the earth into the skies each morning, keeping it alive and promising to share it. I think that's what we should do with the messages we get, one way or the other. Okay, that in turn brings me to the muses. According to the Hellenic myths, the muses live on a sacred mountain. It might be Olympus, Helicon, Parnassus, or Pindus, depending on which story you read, which writer or local set of oral folklore were passed on and recorded at that time. It's a very complex world, mythology. Either way, the muses love Pegasus. And it was Pegasus, in the most powerful dream I've ever had, that guided me to accept a formal apprenticeship to nature spirit, including a time frame and a seemingly endless portion of difficult to swallow medicine that would humble me on this path ever since. But again, I give thanks to the muses every morning in my daily ritual. I started to invest my time in learning the Greek names and the arts for each one, and it just fell flat for me. It just wasn't working. It didn't seem real. It didn't seem meaningful. What seemed meaningful was to remember that the muses are the forces of inspiration and that they can come from your gut, from your dream. They can come on a breeze. They can come from the earth, they can come from the sky. The muses are in your body mind. They're in your guts and your hearts and your brains. They're in the skies above and they're in the earth below. And they're in your friends and they're in the thing that you overheard that was said that seemed meaningful, or a page you picked up and went, whoa, synchronicity. And they're in your coffee cup too. Give thanks for coffee. The muses are everywhere. And we can tune into the muses of divine inspiration anywhere and anytime. And I think they're important. I think something like the muses are important because they open us up to the more than human, because stories exist beyond time and space, and because the pantheon, when we had living pantheons of gods and goddesses and spiritual creatures and mythical guides and so on and so forth, all spoke through the muses at one point in time or another. Which one is it? One of Hesiod's most famous poems. It's not Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's one of Hesiod's. He spends more time thanking the muses at the start. The thanks to the muses start of the poem is actually longer than the rest of the poem. That's the kind of respect I think muses deserve. They're everywhere and we can tune into them. Again, we need intent, we need awareness, we need to create time and space. If we set the intent for a deepened relationship with nature spirit, if we pray and show our reverence to the muses, which just means focusing our consciousness on receiving those gifts, we don't need to speak ancient Greek or memorize complex mantras. That's what we'll get. If we open our awareness to ancestral wisdom, we will get it. It's just a matter of focus, technique, consistency. We may have to try for a while, but it will happen. My old friend Jerome Bernstein of Borderland Personalities declared, after working with Navajo or Diné spiritual leaders for years in the New Mexico desert, we perceive what we're open to. This is what he learnt from them. And we should practice being more open to transrational, what he called transrational teachings. So I'll just flip through a few other timeless practices for opening to nature spirit. Trance dance, rhythmic singing, whatever work or art or play gets you in flow. Yeah, where you forget yourself. Sculpting, painting, tennis, gardening, walking, whatever gets you in flow. Chants, mantra, breath work can be incredibly powerful. Movement practices like Tai Chi, Tai Chi and Qigong, as well as I've already mentioned, as freestyle rave dancing all night. Meditation, especially in its more active forms. And I also want to break this down because I feel like that list, although it's meaningful to me, and I try to utilize all of these things at different times, that we don't have to only be trying to retrace ancestral practices. I came across a particularly modern form of ritualizing openness to truth. And that was using the most modern technology of all, the mobile phone, as a kind of truth-telling magic mirror. I'm serious. We can turn anything to purpose if we have the right intent. If you want your message to be clear, if you want the world to know your truth, if you want to figure that out for yourself first, doesn't have to be about putting it out there. If you want to figure out what you really feel, or maybe even what stands in the way of you confidently tapping into your personal truth, try this. Get your mobile phone out and speak to the camera for 1 minute a day, for as long as you can, minimum 10. That's what Geoff always used to say, the great spiritual teacher from Georgia. Minimum 10. Do something 10 days in a row and it'll start to lock in. I was guided to do it 30 times. I was well on my way and then I got sick, but it had already worked. It worked for me. I started to speak truth to the camera and I got a lot more confident about speaking truth publicly, which made me a lot more confident about what my truth was. Great for yourself. And if you are in business, great for your business, great for marketing, because it's not marketing anymore. It's just conveying truth, and the people that will be attracted to your truth are the right people. That was a bit of a skip from the Muses and Pegasus on beautiful Mount Helicon to mobile phone technology. I hope you're having fun. I kind of am now. I've settled in. On the bottom of this slide, you'll see a little YouTube clip about a sunrise ceremony. Anyone that knows me knows I love a sunrise ceremony. Greeting the source of light at dawn seems the most nourishing and thankful process. I do it as often as possible. It's a simple but genuine ritual of connection to the source of growth. And go and check it out on Nature Calling. It's there to have a look at. It has evolved. It changes over the years, but there's a basic model there for you to try if you wish. Celebrating the solstice. It's most appropriate for this time of year. So sunrise is a really powerful time of year while the sun is at its strongest. But the other thing I wanted to bring to this game, as I'd mentioned in the introduction, beyond the solstice is the new year. And this is where we shift our focus from the sun to the moon. And this will hopefully please any of you who have been thinking, what? He wants to talk about the goddess and nature spirituality. He hasn't even mentioned the moon yet. God. Well, here's the link. Okay, think about it. A moon cycle, as we all know, runs for 28 days. Full through empty, empty through full, the whole cycle. We fill up, we empty out. We're empty. Open through the darkness to all that is. We fill up, we're in the world. Same kind of cycle with the light. And traditionally, there were 13 moons in a year. And 13 times 28, if I trust my calculator, is 364. It's intriguing, no? 364. How many days are in our year? Oh, look. Where's the one missing one go? What an awesome opportunity. I use the summer solstice for this because the summer solstice is linked to the new year. The new year means there's a whole day that's sitting outside of time that can be used for anything you like. It's the perfect astronomical liminal time. So we've got a spare day, and I use the summer solstice for it, again, because it's closest to the new year, to ritualize dropping into the emptiness of time and space that's between all things, or beneath all things, or beyond all things. I allow myself to cease conventional operations. If you have a look at all New Year celebrations, laws went out. The ancient Romans had Saturnalia. The leaders would be slaves. The slaves could be leaders. You could do whatever you wanted. A really crazy modern festival will do the same, probably involving a lot more illicit substances and some really pounding music. but you get the picture. The laws get undone. It's something we crave, and that's why we have so much drug addiction. Because we want the laws to get out of our head for a while. And if we ritualize that every year and really take a New Year's process and turn it into something, oh, drop it all. Where have we been for a year? How have we grown since the last winter solstice? What are we going to do with ourselves for a new year? That's where the whole New Year's resolution idea comes from. Everything just gets made either upside down or out. It's just different. And that's the new year. That's my presentation. I hope that I have managed to include some of the stuff I said I would. Thank you if you've enjoyed it. If you're watching the recording, please feel free to get in touch. I want to do a lot more of this kind of work from now on. So as well as the ecotherapy training, which will continue to be the premium service I offer, I hope, and as well as the introduction to ecotherapy course, which is about to come out, I'd really like to start offering more myth and ritual services. I feel like this is really missing. And if I can do them in a way that celebrates earth-based life, connection to ecosystem, reverence for the many beings, then I feel like I'll be doing work that's important. So we have some time. I would be fascinated to know what has landed for you or where this might go.
Thanks for watching, and please consider liking this video. And if you want more content like this, subscribe, and the nature calling bell will toll for you. This is Geoff signing off.